Alright, I know I'm a little late to the whole AI create something for me trend that's been popping up on YouTube lately. I've been seeing all kinds of videos of AI creating different like things of artwork and stuff like that, and it really made me think that it would be really cool to see how far you could push AI and get it to write like a short story, a magic system, pretty much anything of that caliber. I know people have probably already done stuff like this, but it's something I haven't gotten to test out yet, and I think it would be really fun to test it out here. All right, so to just kind of get into things, I have ChatGPT open right here. I haven't really messed with this program like at all. I've heard really good things about it, and I've heard that it's very capable with everything like any prompt or anything that you give it. So to kind of just like give us a baseline, I guess I'll kind of give it a broad thing. Magic systems are super popular on my channel so far, so I'll go ahead and tell it to create a magic system and just kind of see what it does here. Okay, so it's kind of just writing some stuff out, so I'll go ahead and kind of read ahead. It says, sure, I can help you create a magic system. Here are some key elements you might want to consider. A source of magic. You'll need to decide where magic comes from in your world. Is it a natural force that exists in the world, or is it something that can only be accessed through certain people or objects? Types of magic. What kinds of magic exist in your world? Are there different schools of magic that focus on different types of spells or abilities? Are there elemental types of magic like fire, water, or is it more abstract? Limits of magic. Every good magic system needs some kind of limitation or cost associated with it. This could be a physical or mental strain on a user. A limited amount of... It's going too fast for me. A limited amount of magic that can be used before needing to recharge, or even negative consequences for using magic that's too powerful. Magic users who can use magic in your world. Is it something that anyone can learn, or are there only certain people born with the ability to use it? Are there different levels of skill among magic users, or is everyone who can use magic equally powerful? Consequences. Finally, you'll want to consider what happens when magic is used. Does it have any unintended consequences or side effects? Does it affect the world around it in some way, like causing plants to wither or animals to become agitated? So I think these are some good things to kind of keep track of when you want to write a magic system. These are all very good rules to pay attention to, which I've discussed briefly, kind of in depth. Some of these in my creating a magic system video that I posted a week or two back. So it's very similar concepts here. It says here's an example of a magic system based on these key elements. Source of magic. In this world, magic comes from the life force of all living things. Magic users can tap into this energy to cast spells or perform magical feats. So, kind of a generalized thing. Like, I feel like that's a very common source of magic in a lot of different forms of writing. Types of magic. There are four schools of magic. Elemental magic, that includes fire, water, earth, and air. Healing magic, illusion magic, and enchantment magic. Each school requires a different type of focus and training to master. Again, keeping it very common. This is something that I feel like magic systems do a lot, where they kind of break their magic into different schools and keep them very separated from each other. So I, again, something I'm not complaining. I think this is about where I would be. Limits of magic. Using magic can be mentally and physically exhausting, and overuse can lead to burnout or even death. Additionally, casting spells requires a certain amount of magical energy, which must be replenished over time. So the idea of some kind of life force or mana that you kind of tap into that can kill you if you overuse it, I guess. Magic users. Anyone can learn to use magic, but some people are born with a stronger affinity for it. There are also magical creatures in this world, like dragons, unicorns, and who can naturally harness magic. So interesting that it did a little bit of world building for us. Not only do we have a magic system, but now we know that in this world where this magic exists, there's dragons and unicorns and other magical creatures that can use this magic. So kind of just a side note there that it kind of gave us a little bit of a world building thing here whenever we asked for some magic systems. Consequences. When magic is used, it can have unintended consequences. For example, using fire magic in a forest could cause a wildfire, or using enchantment magic on a person could have unforeseen effects on their psyche. So, interesting consequences. Instead of having like a, oh, you use fire too much, it burns you. Instead, it's like, oh, obviously you play with fire, you could burn everything around you. So, kind of interesting that they would include that as a consequence, because I feel like that would be kind of self explanatory. Of course, this is just one example of a magic system. You can customize your own magic system to fit your world and story. So, overall, this right here, where it gives us some the actual idea for a magic system. Not a very crazy or complex magic system. If anything, I would say it's one of the most common magic systems that people create. Everybody, when they decide they want to implement a magic system into their story, goes through this exact same like example of a magic system. A magic system that drains the life force of people, has different schools of magic, can be mentally and physically taxing. Just these exact same rules. I feel like that's something that everybody goes through, so I'm not super, super impressed with that. However, this up here I think is super awesome. This gives us rules that, if you're going to design a magic system, here are some like things you should pay attention to. I think that is awesome. I think as a writer, it's very cool if you are struggling with, like, let's say, just an example of something, you're struggling with how to build a city, then, going based off of what is given me here for how to make a magic system, I'm assuming you could type in something very similar, say, how do I create a fictional city? And it'll give you these things to look out for, which I think is awesome. I think that is super, super helpful. All right, so that kind of gave us a good baseline for where ChatGPT kind of, builds our stuff if we ask it for world building advice. So now I'm very curious on what it'll do if I actually ask it to make me a story. So again, I've got ChatGPT right here. Um, so I guess I'm a pretty big fan of the horror genre, so I'll go ahead and ask it to write me a horror short story, and let's just see what it does. All right. While it's kind of writing away here, I'll go ahead and start reading. The old mansion on the outskirts of town had always been shrouded in mystery. Nobody knew who had lived there or what secrets lay hidden behind its walls. But when a group of teenagers decided to break in one Halloween night, they soon discovered that some secrets should stay buried. The group of 5 friends snuck into the mansion, eager for a spooky thrill. As they made their way through the creaky halls, they couldn't help but feel like they were being watched. Shadows danced on the walls, and every gust of wind seemed to carry a whisper. But it wasn't until they found the basement that things took a dark turn. The room was dimly lit, and the air was thick with a stench of decay. In the center of the room stood a coffin, its lid slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of them, and they peered inside, but what they saw made their blood run cold. The coffin was empty except for a note that read, "You shouldn't have come here." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them, trapping them in the basement. Panic set in as they tried to force the door open, but it wouldn't budge. And then they heard it, the sound of scratching coming from inside the coffin. They turned around to see the lid slowly closing, as if pulled by an invisible force. And then, in the darkness, they saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at them. One by one, the friends disappeared into the coffin, swallowed up by whatever evil force lay within, and the last one was dragged into the darkness. And as the last one was dragged into the darkness, the mansion fell silent once again, its secrets preserved for another generation to uncover. Interesting. Okay, so I'm happy with this generation here. I actually like that a lot. It plays into some really common horror trends, like where was it? Yeah, so right here where it says the coffin was empty except for a note that read, "You shouldn't have come here." Like that, every horror story's got something like that, "Oh, you shouldn't have come here. You should leave." Just kind of like freak the characters out kind of thing. So that part, is obviously not too exhilarating, as, that's something you see all the time. But other things in here, like I'm very impressed with how descriptive it gets. I think it was here. It says, as they made their way through the creaky halls, they couldn't help but feel like they were being watched. Shadows danced on the walls, and every gust of wind seemed to carry a whisper. I like that a lot. I think it's like it feels more human when it writes stuff like this. If it had left out a bunch of these descriptors and instead just left in stuff like this, a group of 5 friends snuck into the mansion, eager for a spooky thrill, and just kind of skipped over the descriptive, more eerie adding parts to it, then it would feel like a robot was writing the story. Which so it's very impressive that the AI is able to make itself seem more human. So now that we've kind of seen how it writes a short story, I kind of want to get a little bit more specific with it and see if I start adding in more descriptors and more details to my request, if it'll actually start doing different things. Okay, so this time I'm going to get as specific, not like super, super specific, but I'll get specific enough. I'll go ahead and, I want to do a medieval one, so I'll tell it to write a short story about a boy who stumbles upon a baby dragon in the middle of an enchanted forest. Okay, so it's not crazy specific or anything like that, but I am curious what it'll do. Okay, I'll let it write a little bit ahead and then I'll start reading. Okay. Once upon a time, in a far-off enchanted forest, a young boy named Jack was out for a stroll. Jack was an adventurous child who loved to explore the woods, but today he stumbled upon something extraordinary. As he was walking, he heard a faint whimpering sound coming from a nearby bush. Jack was curious, so he went closer to investigate. As he drew closer, he could hear the sound of small wings fluttering. Jack carefully parted the bushes and saw a small, adorable baby dragon lying there. The dragon was about the size of a cat and had beautiful, shiny emerald scales. Jack was amazed and couldn't believe what he was seeing. He knew dragons were rare creatures, and it was considered an honor to have one's presence. Jack, being a curious child, decided to take the baby dragon home with him, thinking that it might be lost. On his way home, Jack noticed that the baby dragon was incredibly exhausted and seemed to have been wandering for a while. Jack knew he had to help him, so he took him in his arms and ran back home as fast as he could. Once Jack arrived home, he laid the dragon down on his soft pillow and offered him some fresh water and fruits. The dragon was grateful and drank the water eagerly. Jack observed that the dragon was shivering and felt cold, so he covered him with a small blanket. Over the next few days, Jack took care of the baby dragon, feeding him, keeping him warm, and playing with him. As the days passed, the dragon began to grow stronger, and his wings grew larger. Jack realized that he couldn't keep the dragon with him forever, as he knew it would eventually become too big to be kept indoors. One day, as Jack was taking the dragon for a walk, they heard a loud roar coming from the forest. It was the mother dragon who had been searching for her baby. Jack realized that he had to return the baby dragon to his rightful owner, so he took him back to the spot where he had found him. As soon as the mother dragon saw her baby, she flew down and embraced him tightly. Jack watched in amazement as the mother dragon thanked him by nuzzling him with her snout. Jack felt overwhelmed with joy knowing that he had helped reunite the baby dragon with its mother. From that day on, Jack knew that he had made a new friend in the enchanted forest, and whenever he was out exploring, he would hear the faint sound of a dragon's roar, reminding him of the incredible adventure he had been a part of. Interesting. So, this felt more of a young kid story, which totally fine. I'm not gonna like complain. I'm sure if I had write me a dark fantasy or write me a adult fiction story, it would have. So far, it seems like it doesn't just ignore anything, any prompts that I give it. It actually takes those prompts to heart and actually incorporates that into the story, which is very, very neat. Because I've played around with other AI generators. I'm blanking on, I think it's called AI Dungeon. It's like a mobile app where you can do very similar to this, except it's based around like an RPG kind of thing, and it doesn't work near as well as this. You'll write stuff into it, and it'll just completely blank and write whatever the heck it wants. It doesn't even bother to pay attention to what you had told it to write. So it's very cool. Even though I didn't give it super specific things to do, it still incorporated the baby dragon and the little boy finding it. And I thought that was, it wasn't the craziest story. It wasn't the most intricate or complex story that I've ever read, but, it was a good children's story, I think, and if you had told me that a robot wrote this, I wouldn't have believed you before I had, done this little experiment here. So yeah, so I just wanted to make this video to kind of play around with the AI generator a little bit. I had seen artists utilize this in some ways to see what kind of art projects and pictures this thing could generate. But I personally hadn't seen anybody write like stories with ChatGPT. And I'm sure there's other AI generators that you could utilize to do the same stuff. But overall, it's a little crazy knowing that in the short amount of time AI has gone from writing just garbage to actually being able to write believable things that look like they were written by humans. And so in a way it's a little scary, but it's also a little cool. I think there's a lot of different ways it could go. It is nice that if you wanted to, you could utilize this AI generator, to help you write stuff if you wanted to. As we saw when I asked it to write me a magic system, it didn't just create me whatever magic system, it created me a magic system like I'd asked, but it also gave me tips and tricks on how to create my own. And so it's just very cool knowing that there is something here that will assist you in that way. If you have a very specific question in terms of world building or writing, there is something you can turn to that will not only give you an example, but tell you how to reach that point as well. But yeah, as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.